Beyond the Great Juncture by Wayne Ellis. Copyright Wayne Ellis 2013. Chapter 1 The Voyage. What do you think about this temple on Mars? Asked Christoph Braun. Do you think we can actually achieve hyperspace via the realms? They sat in a coffee shop called Superb Brew aboard the Starship Centauri. It was one of many shops that made up what looked like a small rural town, recreated inside most of the starship's main fuselage. And it came with some very earthly comforts. A gentle breeze blew outside, the sun was shining, and you could see in the distance many plants and trees. Even a small creek ran through the center of town. First of its kind in the interstellar ships, Centauri was quite a feat of engineering. I think you're right, Lena, said Braun. Hell, don't want to become an old man out there. Christoph was 32 and always had to be the life of the party. He was the type of person who could suddenly turn a very serious situation into light-hearted humor. He had black hair and a short stocky build, due to his German descent. He wore the Earth Federation's uniform, which was heavily influenced by the Indian kurta. The Earth Federation's patch was proudly woven into the upper left side of the jacket. The patch was a 16-pointed star made up of 9 interlocking triangles, surrounded by 2 rows of 8 and 16 petals. Zach looked up from an electronic magazine he was reading. I read an article a few months ago that the late Sean Cummins wrote. He said that not only is it possible that we could hyperspace via the realms, we could go beyond the need for spacecraft altogether. Zach Reeve may strike you as a young man who did exceptionally well at university. You might even believe he was still at university. He looked a lot younger than his 23 years of age, with his boyish looks and blonde curly hair. He also wore uniforms similar to Braun's. He was New Zealand born. You mean, like Stargate or something? Asked Lena. Lena was 27, with thin build and sandy-colored hair. Born in France, she had her hair in a bob and wore the sari version of the uniform. Unlike commercial airline uniforms a century before, hers had a high collar and a long dress. Perhaps. Cummins said, and I quote, the realms would give us the capacity to become so united that the whole galaxy would be like one big Earth. Said Braun, I'll have so many contacts, I won't have time to talk to everyone. I don't think Mr. Cummins was talking about social networking. Said Lena, LT something much more subtle. Reeve raised his eyebrows at Braun. You should read his biography from Seeker to the Keeper. I read it, said Braun in mock surrender. Hey, Zacko, you're taking this all way too seriously. Lena smiled, feeling a little elated. The power of the Oracle and its realms is a broad subject. It certainly is, said Captain Daniel Withers, entering the coffee shop. Withers was an adult man in his late 40s. His head was shaved really short and graying a little. As well as being tall, he was rather solid without being overweight. Your timing is impeccable, sir, said Braun. Withers grinned as the three leaned towards him with interest. Don't forget me, said Yuri Gyuzov, the first officer, entering soon after Withers. So is yours, sir, said Braun. Yuri Gyuzov was younger than Withers at 34. He was also tall, but somewhat slimmer than the older man. He had short, sandy-colored hair and also wore the Earth Federation's uniform. No show without number 1, said Gyuzov in his Russian accent. That's right, number 1 inch, said Withers. The Oracle and its realms is a broad subject. Please continue, said Gyuzov. Our elder brother, Arden from Calden, described the Oracle as something infinite, said Withers. This may well be enough information for transformed beings who are still back on Earth, but because we have a special divine mission I should go into it further. Now, when I say Oracle I mean he held up the small disk, the Oracle of the Guardian and the Planetary Oracle, respectively. The mandala within the Oracle is formed by 9 interlocking triangles that surround and radiate out from a central point. The 4 triangles here that point upwards represent God or the masculine aspect. 5 of the triangles point downwards, representing the goddess or the feminine aspect. These 9 triangles are interlaced in such a way as to form 43 smaller triangles in a web symbolic of the entire universe. So, 4 of the guardians channel the masculine power, said Reeves, and the other 5, the feminine. Yes, replied Withers. And the 43 triangles represent the realm keepers, asked Lena. That's also true, replied Withers, amongst other things. Like I said, 43 of these triangles make up the galaxy. One of these triangles is called a quadrant. Within this quadrant, 9 solar systems represent the planetary oracles, at the realm of innocence. Planets like Mars, stated Reeve. This quadrant is what we'll be fighting to liberate, assented. You're all well informed, said Withers. We are about to liberate the last planetary oracle, so the realms make up the planetary oracles, said Reeve, and are activated only by all the 43 keepers, under the protection of the guardians. So what do the shadows hope to achieve, queried Lena. One mean, we have such unified force, their own right. See this mandala, he said, pointing at the oracle of the guardian. See the 14 points. These are the milestones of our evolution up till now and into the future. People of Earth who made it to the 7th point were transformed. So that means the shadows can only access the realms up to the 6th, suggested Reeve. Yes, only the lower realms, replied Withers. A shadow in the first realm can possess and control a person, or collectively possess a nation or even the whole world in this way. Like Earth, commented Reeve. In the 6th realm, there are dark ghost-like, human or beastly physical forms that have dark influential powers. Oh, brother, said Lena. One guess will be up against more of the latter at Udicia, said Withers, and you could be right there. Brother Arden said they had a strong hold on the planet. Later they all walked out of the coffee shop, elated. At last, all the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle were coming together. Withers looked at his senior officers and grinned. It's big, I know. Like the gurus who were chosen to transform the Earth 100 years ago, we've been chosen in these times to help transform the galaxy. Well, I'm blown away, exclaimed Braun. Anyone for a bit of fresh air? I think I'll go for a walk, said Lena, feeling a little dizzy. Sounds good, said Braun. Okay, said Reeve. We'll meet you back on the bridge, said Withers, motioning Gylith to follow him. They walked along the street not saying much. The artificial sun had risen high in the projected skyline. Everything inside the ship within the emulated town was real. The only virtual parts of the whole scene were the sky and the vista. In the distance, the waterfall looked like it was coming down a mountainside. Passing through the main center of town was like passing through any typical country town on Earth. People either walked or rode electric scooters up and down the streets. Some were having conversations on the footpaths, while others came out of shops with new clothing or groceries in their hands. Hey! Guys, called a voice from the roof of one of the shops. Nice day for it. It was Tristan Seymour, the town's leading technician. He was a Frenchman, of medium build with brown curly hair, and was 28 years of age. He was wearing an overall-style uniform, with the mandala woven on his left breast pocket. What are you doing up there? Asked Lena. I was just checking the roof. Apparently, it leaks in the rain, said Seymour, climbing down to where they were standing on the road. That's funny, said Braun, looking up at the simulated sky and chuckling. Urion step in front of me in humor, today. Reeve grinned. Feel like a walk? Asked Lena. Sure. Why not? Replied Seymour, I'm between jobs, anyway. They all walked together to the edge of town. Coming into a parkland area, they could see many different species of birds, flying among the trees or pecking at seeds on the lawns. The 4 crossed a stone bridge in the shape of a rainbow, staring at Centauri's version of the oracle. Pillars surrounded the oracle, with swastikas displayed on each one of them. Further ahead, a modest-sized, domed temple proudly stood with an etching of the primordial fountain on the front of the building. A large group of people were sitting in front of it, meditating. Hey, Lena called a young woman from the group. She walked over to where the four were standing. Haven't seen you for a while. Dana, nice to see you again. How's the military going? Asked Lena with a funny look. Dana was 30, tall with sandy blonde hair. Born in Israel, she was the military advisor for the Centauri. At that moment, Jerry Bourne sneaked up on her from behind as a joke. Without looking behind, Dana grabbed Jerry's arm and flipped him over her left shoulder. A stunned Bourne looked up at her from his horizontal position. It's going great. I'm okay, croaked Bourne, climbing to his feet. Jerry Bourne was 27, of medium height with straight brown hair. He was born in the United States. Oh, Mr. Bourne, our chief engineer, said Braun. Well, someone's got to keep the cogs turning, said Bourne, shaking Braun's hand. He looked at Reeve, Seymour and Lena. Hello. They exchanged pleasantries, and everyone was silent for a while as if they all felt something at the same time. Did anyone else have an in-the-moment experience? Asked Lena. Yeah, said Seymour. Me too, said Reeve. Same, said Bourne. What happened? Asked Dana. We're all keepers of the right way, said Reeve. TM not, said Dana. M in the juncture. What's the juncture? Asked Bourne. Where the left and right ways meet, replied Reeve. Haven't you been spending some downtime with your ring? Well, no. Engineering takes a lot of my attention, said Bourne. Can you run Methruff the basics? Sure, replied Reeve, happy to be able to give a small lecture. Basically, the first realm is the realm of innocence. Then there's the realm of knowledge, realm of contentment, realm of security, realm of collectivity, which is yours, and the realm of forgiveness. As you know, there's a left, central and right way to all these realms. The left and right ways meet at the realm of forgiveness, and it is at this point that it's called the Great Juncture. But didn't the gurus call this point the gate? Asked Bourne. Yes, said Reeve, it was called the gate, because it was the gate to enlightenment, the gate to our self-realization. It still is, but in the universal scheme of things we enter the realm of innocence and move up through the other realms from there. That's why it's called the gate, in a galactic sense. He paused. However, the Great Juncture is still a gate, too, because it has to be opened at the other end, for a particular world to become enlightened. Like the gurus, we'll work from the realm of innocence to the Great Juncture, clearing the ways and realms as we go. Confused? I'm an engineer. I'm always confused, responded Bourne. Everyone laughed. Hey, our temple is emanating a pleasant, calming power, said Lena. Vibrations, said Reeve, the universal power. I think we are close to Mars, said Braun, tuning into the vibrations. Let's get back to the bridge. Captain Withers was sitting in his ready room. He waved his hand across a tiny projector embedded into the top of his desk. A holographic head-up display shot up which he began interacting with. The holographic projection simulated a trajectory over 4.5 light-years, predicting it would take over 20 years to reach Alpha Centauri A under normal propulsion. A holographic image of his first officer appeared on the screen. Sorry to disturb you, sir, said Yuri Gylith, but we're approaching Mars. Withers raised his eyebrows. Bring us into orbit. Withers stood up and walked out through the automatic doors to the bridge. He briefly eyed the crew before looking towards his first officer. We've entered Martian orbit as requested, sir, said Gylith. Withers looked at the holographic image of Mars projected above the centerpiece console of the bridge. Projected data from the Cydonia region scrolled through its side. Move to directly above the temple, ordered Withers. Said his helmsman, Braun, onto it. He danced his fingers through the hologram over his panel, maneuvering the holographic versions of the ship and planet to align them. Done. A huge mandala suddenly appeared in space. It was turning in a clockwise direction. Are we sure it leads to Alpha Centauri A? Wondered Lena, the communications officer. Withers wasn't sure, because intergalactic realm jumping wasn't Earth's time. He figured he would have to fall back on a scientific approach. Zack, fire a small probe into the center of it, and monitor where it goes, he ordered. Yes sir, he said, his fingers dancing over the head-up screen in front of him. It's away. They were now looking at the front of the ship projected in front of them. If you weren't accustomed to it, it looked very much like something had sheared the front section of the ship clean off. If you walked over there, you might get sucked into space. Of course, no one flinched. This type of ultra-high-definition video had been around for a very long time. They watched as the probe shot out of the side of the ship and headed towards the mandala with incredible speed. The console in the center of the bridge started displaying a bird's-eye video of the probe. That's beautiful, said Lena, referring to the colors that glittered around the mandala. Suddenly, the probe's eye view changed from the view of the stars on the other side to nothing. They had lost the video signal. Sir, the probes entered a different region of space, offered Reeve. Well, said Withers. Yes, said Reeve, surprised. RV received the telemetry. He diverted the view to the center bridge console. Again the computer simulated the Centauri's trajectory in relation to the Earth and Alpha Centauri, and it also added where the probe had ended up. That probe has jumped 4.5 light-years, Asset exclaimed, awestruck. One made it to Alpha Centauri. That's good enough for me. He turned towards Braun. Take us in. Use the same trajectory the probe used. Gotcha. Hold on to your hats, ladies and gentlemen. We may be in for a bumpy ride. Braun's fingers danced over his head-up display, and the ship started to speed towards the opening. Yee-hoo! Withers gave Braun a funny look, conveying similar but more formal sentiments. Over the intercom ship-wide. Like the probe, they approached the mandala. At once, their whole view of the universe changed. Chapter 2, The Realm of Innocence. The Centauri materialized within the orbit of a planet similar to Mars. In the distance they could see a huge armada of dark, crude-looking ships stationed in orbit. Suddenly, a wide beam of energy shot out from one of the dark ships, hitting a different class of ship in a lower orbit. It exploded in a huge fireball, before being quickly extinguished. My God! Exclaimed Withers, stunned. He guessed it was a Guardian ship. Christoph, hold our position. You got it, said Braun, looking out the front view screen with concern. Where are we, Zack? Asked Withers. We're orbiting the fourth planet from Alpha Centauri A, said Reeve a little nervously. Like Mars, it's very cold on the surface and harbors no life. Can you see the temple? Asked Withers. Yes, it's directly below us. Give me a close-up view of the area in front of the dome, ordered Withers. The view of the front view screen 20 ohmed on the assembly area of the Oracle. They could see figures moving around. Explosions rocked the area. Sir, there's a battle going on down there. Oh dear. Started Gylith. Centauri, Centauri. Called a mysterious voice over the Centauri's comlink. This, Reeve, open a channel to Yarmul. Commanded Withers. Open, sir. Yarmul, sir, this is the captain of the Centauri and the guardian of Earth. Standing by for your orders. I insist I call you sir, replied Yarmul, as I've been given strict instructions by our Honorable Arden. Withers' mind whirled. He was the lead guardian. Arden was alive after his mother saw him on Cydonia. He knew this wasn't the right time to ponder these things. He turned his attention back to the holographic companel. Okay, what is your situation down there? We're holding off the best we can, but the shields around the temple are losing integrity. Replied Yarmul. Sorry, sir, but 3 of those huge spacecraft have broken away and are heading towards us. Interrupted Reeve. Wither could feel a surge of vibrational power coming from the Oracle of the Guardian, which was in his uniform pocket. He pulled it out and attached it to his left breast pocket. Continue to hold our position, Christoph, and as before, stand by for Oracle sync. He turned his attention to the comm panel. Yarmul, stand by. We're transferring the keepers. Thank the goddess for that, said Yarmul. Energy weapons from the shadows have just penetrated the shields. The temple dome was just destroyed. We only just got to know her, murmured Withers, referring to the Centauri. He touched a hollow button on his comm panel. This is your captain speaking. All hands please head to the temple immediately. He looked at the bridge crew. That includes you. Sir, are you going to take the shadows on by yourself? Asked Yusuf sternly. Must insist that the captain is putting himself at an incredible risk. You're too important, Yuri. You must make it to the planet. It's an order. Wither lightened his sternness a little and smiled. Good luck, keeper of the realm of forgiveness. After overhearing their conversation, Lena walked off the bridge, annoyed, and met up with Braun back inside the village. He's going to kill himself, snapped Lena. He's important, too. Braun gave Lena a solemn look. He's not the captain anymore. His guardianship has been activated. He's now doing his new job and protecting us. All the crew of the Centauri assembled on the temple, 43 of them arranged according to their positions on the oracle. At once, the entire temple was enveloped in a brilliant, subtle light, and all the realm keepers were transferred. We have the keepers. The shadows have now entered the temple area, yelled Yarmul between panting breaths. Withers said nothing but looked at the enormous shadow ships that loomed over the Centauri on the front view screen. The view suddenly changed to a black figurine, a black uniform, with red piercing eyes. You are doomed, Guardian, said the menacing voice through the comm panel. Withers touched the oracle, and extra vibrations began emitting from it. Not exactly a fair fight, is it? Withers asked. But /LL take my chances. The Shadow Lord laughed an evil laugh. Prepare to die. Well, take your best shot, snapped Withers, powering up the Centauri and heading his ship towards the 3 shadow ships. What are you doing? Roared the Shadow Lord, surprised. An energy beam shot out from the closest shadow ship and hit the oracle-generated force field in front of the Centauri. Withers slid the holographic controls to full power. That'll teach them for parking so close to me. He ran off the bridge and into the parklands towards the temple. Ash went over the bridge, the Centauri hit the closest shadow ship. Withers fell hard to the ground and started crawling towards the oracle as debris rained all around him. Standing on the Centauri's oracle, he put his right hand on the oracle of the Guardian at his left heart. A pillar fell down in front of him. Something came to his consciousness then, as if the words came out of nowhere. Great Goddess, please make me a fearless, pure spirit. He felt a downward movement, like he de-entered a very fast elevator. When he looked up, an angry Shadow Lord grabbed him and pinned him to the ground. He was now on the planetary oracle, at the planet below. This was Marcia, this planet having the same qualities as Mars in the realm of innocence. This realm, like Mars, was not only the base of all its evolutionary realms, it also acted as a gate to the realms. He fought, knocking a huge blade from the Shadow's grip. He was aware of all the other guardians around him, fighting other Shadow Lords, desperately keeping them away from the Keepers. He also noticed that the sides of the arched tunnel looked the same as when they had hyperjumped between the realms in the ship. Withers was soon engaged in the battle, the oracle transforming into a mighty sword. Sparring with an angry Shadow Lord, who also wielded a large blade, he was reminded that this was what he had trained for. There was no pause in the fighting, even though the scene around them had changed. They had arrived on Udicia in the realm of innocence. In this case, this realm only represented the country and not the planet, as on Marcia. This gave the Guardians the upper hand, as the power of innocence strengthened them, particularly the Guardian Raunoff, who guarded this particular realm. His sword struck with quick and deadly blows, and several Shadow Lords immediately fell by his hand. Withers had also swung with precision to dispatch his foe. The other Guardians followed suit, and before long, all the Shadow Lords had been slain. Withers was about to thank Yarmul for his input, when 3 huge mandalas appeared before them, spinning in a clockwise direction. These were the entry points to the left, central and right ways. The Guardians and the Realm Keepers gathered in front of the mandalas, information specific to their own ways. Withers was the Guardian of the right way. His keepers were mostly made up from his senior staff on the Centauri. With no time to lose, the 9 Guardians and 43 Realm Keepers stepped through the entry points. The Keepers were immediately sent straight to their realms. 6 Guardians went to the main center realms, while the remaining 3 Guardians were free to traverse the ways. Their number 1 priority was to protect their keepers, and the second was to clear any blockages that might impede the vibrational flow through the ways. Withers materialized in the realm of innocence within the right way. He looked around a huge forest canopy, momentarily disoriented, taking in the smell and the sounds of nature. Becoming thoughtless, he placed his hand on the oracle at his left breast pocket. Now in the right way, he would have to prepare the way and its related realms for transformation. His eye caught what he was wearing. The oracle had changed his clothing. "What's this?" Withers grinned. "A robe." He was wearing a long dark brown robe with a frilly light brown shirt, bell-shaped cuffs and brown trousers with cowboy boots. "Captain," called a voice in the distance. He grabbed the oracle and held it. He took off, not responding to the greeting. It could be a shadow trick, even though the voice sounded like Reeves. The forest was dense, with the undergrowth potentially noisy, but Withers managed to move through like a gentle breeze. Arriving at a clearing, he spotted Reeve walking around, a little stunned. Withers casually walked into the clearing, surprising the younger man. "Captain," said Reeve, holding a big stick in his hand. Reeve wore a dark cloak and tight pants, with elfish-looking boots. "Keep your voice down," ordered Withers. He eyed the stick and grinned. "T'll give you a better weapon shortly." "Nice boots, by the way." "Oh, thanks," said Reeve. "Where are we?" "In your country, the realm of innocence, on the right side," replied Withers. "Oh, I see. Udicia, in this case, is the temple," murmured Reeve. "That's very interesting." There was silence. Only the cicadas chirped in the background. "We'll set up camp," said Withers. "It's getting dark." Withers woke very early in the morning, his keen senses picking up unnatural noise in the forest. He knew immediately that 2 life forms were stealthily bearing down on their position. Reeves was still sleeping. Withers decided to leave him like that, as he would make too much noise if awakened. He stood in the shadow of a tree, waiting very still. A casual observer may have thought that he, too, was a tree. A branch cracked loudly close by. He grabbed the oracle, and tremendous vibrations started surging from it. A black, 4-legged beast broke out of a bush right next to Reeves. Huge claws flashed through the air. Suddenly, Reeve awoke and held up his right hand. Tremendous vibrations shot out of the palm of his hand, and the black shadow dog disappeared in mid-flight. Withers was ready for the other man charging at him from the bushes. The man raised his sword, but suddenly realized that Withers was not the enemy that he was pursuing. At the same time, Withers received cooler vibrations from the oracle. "Hello," said Reeve. "I think I killed that beast you were pursuing." "Beast?" "It was a man, but a beast nonetheless. Our town will be grateful that he's dead." Of course, thought Reeve, the oracle manifests absolute truth. Those on Udicia can't see the shadows for what they really are. "What's your name?" asked Reeve. "Gylith." He replied. "Where are you from?" "I'm Daniel and this is Zach," said Withers, shaking his hand. "We're special agents from Silonia." "Who was that?" asked Reeve, also shaking Gylith's hand. "Lero, the most brutal tyrant that Lamar has ever known. He and his henchmen have poured fear into the hearts of Lemurians for many years." Gylith paused, deep in thought. By the way, it is unusual that he has come after his enemies on his own. Normally, he would send his men. Well, replied Withers, these are unusual times. And talking about that, we need your help. Oh, said Gylith. I'm gathering some fighting men, said Withers, and preparing them for battle. I don't understand, said Gylith. There are only a few of Lero's men left here. Reeve will help you to remove them, but your country is needed to liberate the whole of Udicia. Okay, I saw how easily you killed Lero, said Gylith. We owe you a debt for that. You don't owe us anything, said Withers. You owe it to yourself. You owe it to your families, to your community, to your freedom. This darkness must end. Later, Withers pulled Reeve aside to discuss Reeve's role in this realm. Very spontaneous, said Withers. That Shadow Lord didn't stand a chance against the power of innocence. Reeve held up his right hand. On his wrist he wore a gold bangle, with a small disc covering his lower palm. It had an etching of a four-petaled flower on it. I didn't really do anything, said Reeve, still feeling a little rattled. That's how it works, said Withers. The oracle does all the work. Withers placed the oracle against Reeve's smaller disc. The power in this talisman will send any shadow to the foot of the Great Juncture, said Withers. Here they will be judged. I could send you the Lemurian army. You've just demonstrated how in tune a keeper is to the oracle. When the time comes, send me a fighting force, as well as the remaining shadows. To the realm of forgiveness, to the foot of the Great Juncture, murmured Reeve. Yes, that would solve the problems of this realm and others. Then it would be up to Toyou and the other guardians to defeat them there. Just keep that childlike innocence about you, said Withers. That is your greatest power. I'm ready, said Reeve, watching the first sign of the sun rising on this alien world. A couple of hours later, Withers, Reeve and Gylith broke out of the thick forest into a clearing. The countryside was a little elevated, and they could see down into a picturesque valley. Nice, commented Reeve. Thanks, said Gylith. I can see your town down there, said Withers, pointing. Reeves turned to Withers and held up his hand. Good luck, sir. And you. Call if you need me. I can be here in seconds, said Withers. Take care. And you, Gylith, thanks for your help. It's an honor. The three men parted. Withers was watching them walking away in the distance when suddenly a huge mandala appeared before him. He stepped through and materialized in a similar scene, in another part of Udicia. It took a moment to get his bearings, and then he started taking in this new country in the realm of creativity. He decided to follow a road down into the valley, receiving the coolness from the oracle. Lena would be somewhere in this direction, he thought. He noticed a river running along that road, a little further along, and decided to head that way. Chapter 3, The Realm of Creativity. Withers made it to the river's edge a few hours later. He spotted Lena a little further down. She was meditating beneath a large tree. She was holding up her hands, palms up, but she was paying particular attention to her right thumb. There she wore a gold ring, with an etching of a six-petaled flower. Withers gently sat down beside her, as Lena looked up, a little startled. I knew someone with good vibrations was coming, said Lena. Otherwise, if I'd felt heat coming from my ring, I'd be up this tree. Good to see you're looking beyond your normal senses, said Withers. Been here long? I've just arrived. So Elle thought I might get some direction, she said, looking towards the river. The river should lead me to a town and I can go from there. Nice dress, by the way. Thanks. Lena's dress was long, with frills around the bottom of the long skirt. Even larger frills adorned her breast, which drew one's attention, not in a salacious way, but because of the work that had gone into the material. She was wearing a long light-colored shawl around her shoulders. It was a fashion that was left behind in its past, but here it was in modern Udicia. Withers pulled the oracle from his robe and held it against Lena's ring. The ring began to vibrate in the same way. Wow! Daniel, Withers stopped in his tracks. They were following a dirt road alongside the river and they could see a village in the distance. The voice was in his head. Daniel. Yes, said Withers. Lena looked at him curiously, saying nothing. It is Arden. Withers looked around as if to see Arden standing in the bush. He looked up, trying to find a spaceship. Nothing. Where are you? Never mind at the moment. Said Arden. I am with you in the present. Withers remained solemn, saying nothing. I will be here with you until transformation. Arden paused. Remember to use the Oracle of the Guardian, but not just as an invaluable tool. You must become that tool. You must become those subtle powers within. That's the whole point, to go beyond identifying with the Oracle and become the Oracle. Once all those on Udicia know that, then the shadows will cease to exist. Soon they arrived at a small village. It was mostly deserted as they walked the street and some curtains parted as they passed. It made Withers feel like he was in one of those old Western movies. Perhaps this was a space Western. Up ahead there was a huge crowd congregating in front of what looked like a church. The church was apparently the most important building in town. Lena looked up at the steeple on top of the building and immediately felt pain in his lower abdomen. It looked like an X that had been rotated slightly in an anti-clockwise direction. Can't they feel the negativity coming from that building? Asked Lena, shocked. And that man. May this congregation be blessed and blessed by the Great One, intoned the cloaked, hooded man standing in front, as he finished his sermon. He paused glaring at Withers and Lena. No, they can't, said Withers, speaking a little more quietly as they approached. Oh. Said the hooded man, new disciples. That will be all for today. I'm passing the hat around. So please be very generous. May the Great One bring joy into your hearts. Everyone held up their own X pendants in a prayer pose. That's horrible, murmured Lena. Wither nodded, watching everyone go. At last, only they and the hooded figure remained. Withers walked towards the man, his right hand covering the oracle which he had placed over his left heart. There was a temporary standoff as the hooded figure realized they weren't his disciples after all. Two glowing red eyes suddenly glared at them from under the hood. Maybe he's not that thrilled to see us after all, said Withers, detaching the oracle. The hooded figure detached a large metal X from his cloak. Withers guessed the Shadow Lord probably used it for sermons and punishments. Now it was to become a weapon. Blasphemers, roared the hooded Shadow Lord, raising his X, be gone. He threw the X like a boomerang. While it was approaching at great speed, Lena directed vibrations towards it from her ring, and it diverted its course, going back to the Shadow Lord. Startled, the hooded Shadow Lord suddenly took off down the road towards the river. He wasn't running, he had levitated and was sailing across the ground at the speed of a car. Where did he pull that trick from? Asked Lena, baffled. She was about to run after him but was picked up by Withers, who was also floating above the ground. He was standing on a larger oracle. His comes from science, mine from the powers of the universe, said Withers, gaining speed. Well, put the pedal to the metal, urged Lena. The Grim Reaper is getting away. Withers grinned as they headed towards the river. They landed near the river after they lost sight of the hooded Shadow Lord. He got away, said Lena. He's around here, said Withers, checking the oracle. I can feel his heat. The water looks refreshing. Don't mind if I do, said Lena. She walked over to the river, looking upstream and downstream. A little more natural than the water we've been drinking from Centauri's spring. Many birds were chirping in the trees all around them, and the occasional fish made contact with the water's surface. Suddenly, the hooded Shadow Lord came out of the water. He hurled the X, which came towards Lena at a frightening speed. In a split second, she remembered Herring and held up her hand. An invisible power surged from the palm of her hand, knocking the X down. She shot another surge of invisible power towards the Shadow Lord, who appeared to melt back into the river. "You all right, Lena?" "Yes, thanks," said Lena. "Just a little shaken." "Yes." "You've sent him to the Great Juncture for judgment," said Withers. "Excellent response, by the way. Just what Elle needed to know." "Thanks, sir," replied Lena. "You know, I think am beginning to appreciate what you've been through, sir." Withers gave Lena a solemn look, momentarily reflecting on the time when his mother passed him the oracle. "Daniel, one day you will have to face a darkness, way beyond anything that I know," Lena responded. Withers. The oracle had certainly tested him, from survival in the Australian outback, to fighting monsters in an oracle-simulated world. The tests were grueling and had almost pushed him to breaking point. It was time to put it all to the test. Withers and Lena went a little further down the river, when they noticed cool vibrations coming from their respective divine tools. They followed the coolness into the bush, which became cooler and cooler the further they went in. After pushing their way through a thick part of the scrub, they finally found a small group of people painting and sketching the scene around them. It was next to a creek that probably flowed into the river. Lena was thrilled that they were finally going to meet some friendly people, and creative ones, at that. She carefully approached them, noting how secluded this little spot was. "Hello, there," she said warmly. All heads turned her way. A few of them were surprised, others frightened. Withers put his hand on the oracle, sending some heart-strengthening vibrations towards them. "How did you find us?" asked one of the men. There were 4 women and 2 men in the group. "We're not the authorities," said Withers, soothingly. "We're friends. I'm Lena." "We're from Silonia," Lena said, rehearsing the lines that Withers had given her. "We're making contact with gurus like you and looking for potential recruits." "I'm SEF. This is Mile, Zanita, Fern, Zandra and Lal. Others have come through our town before," explained SEF, "but ended up falling under Keener's illusions. Now, it's against the law to be creative." "That tyrant, Keener," snapped Zandra. "He destroyed my florist, my sewing shop." "Who was Keener?" asked Lena. "The Minister of the Freedom of the People," responded Zandra. "He runs this tone on fear, but we're sick of." "He's dead," said Withers, politely interrupting. Everyone was happy, but they didn't want to cheer yet. They wanted to verify this later. "If he is," said Zandra, "then I don't need this terrible pendant anymore." She threw one X-shaped pendant to the ground. Withers picked it up. "I've seen ones like this before." He discreetly vibrated it against the oracle and passed it back to Zandra. "Try it now." Zandra took it reluctantly and put it back around her neck. Instead of sitting on the side with the design, it fell on her chest with the back of it sticking out. It appeared to be turning the other way round. "It feels cool," exclaimed Zandra. "How did you do that?" "My hands are starting to feel cool," said Mile. SEF checked his hands and found they were cool, too. Lena was amazed. She knew from Earth history that, a century ago, people's hands could feel vibrations, but it was amazing to see people experiencing it now. "Lena will teach you everything you need to know about this new awareness," said Withers. "You can exchange vibrations between your excess." Lena gave Withers a funny look, but smiled. Withers grinned back. "You have to think like a guru now as well as a keeper. You studied our history." "Yes, I did," said Lena, "and I will." "Very good," said Withers. He paused in thought. "I must talk to SEF before I leave." Withers said goodbye to Lena and approached SEF, leading him towards the creek. "Where's the battle?" "Lena's the key," responded Withers. "What do you mean?" Withers suddenly walked towards the creek. A huge mandala appeared and Hewitt through, it disappeared behind him. SEF raced back to the group. "Lal, come with me, quickly." The real transition has come, not Keener's mad vision. We must rally the troops. Chapter 4, The Realm of Contentment. Withers arrived in the Realm of Contentment at the end of a quiet street. As Hegwest, this was part of the suburban sprawl. The further he went into the town, the more the poverty and lawlessness were evident. He rounded a corner to see a group of children playing with toy guns. One young boy was suddenly hit in the side of the face with a projectile. The rest of the boys ran as they thought they were going to get into trouble. "You all right?" Mate Withers helped the boy to his feet. The boy was about to run but realized that there was something non-threatening about this man. "Yeah," he said shyly. "Sorry, mister. I know we should be at school." "What's your name?" asked Withers. "Nell," said the boy. "Hey, do you work with my dad?" "What does he do?" "He fights the bad guys," said Nell. Withers grinned. "I'm on his side." "What's his name?" "Zep," said Nell. "I haven't seen him for a week." Withers put his hand on his head. "Don't worry, son. That day is coming very soon." Closer to the main town, Withers was stopped by two law officials, riding what Hugh described as a floating chariot. It was open at the top and levitated by anti-gravity. "What are you doing in this sector?" it demanded a black-robed official. He wore a black helmet, covered by a reflective visor. "I'm a tourist from Cylonia," said Withers. "I strayed a little from the tour this morning." The other official laughed, as if it was the best joke he had heard in a long time. "You're very funny. Tourism finished in Rylos years ago." "A spy, more like it." He pulled out his gun and motioned Withers to get in the back of the chariot. Withers checked the oracle. These men were possessed by shadow drones in the universal sense. He climbed in the back. At least they would lead him to the real obstacle in this realm. "What were you doing in Sector C?" it demanded the police sergeant. Withers, the police sergeant and the two officials were standing in an interrogation room at the Rylos police station. Withers remained cool, calm and collected. The sergeant wasn't a shadow lord either, he decided. He needed a way to get to the thick of the action. "I've got some information from the rebels, that you may be interested in, but I was hoping to pass it on to someone a little higher in authority," responded Withers calmly. "I'm high enough in authority for you," snapped the sergeant, pointing his gun at Withers. Withers glared at him and the other man lowered the gun. "It's important that I see your superior," snapped Withers, feigning impatience. "Now. How dare you speak to the sergeant like that?" said one of the officials. He tried toe fire at Withers. Using the oracle, Withers jammed the electronics in the energy bolt gun. The others fired but their guns, too, were jammed. Most guns in Udicia had single energy bolt firing capabilities, and it took nearly a minute of re-energizing before the next energy bolt could be fired. The sergeant charged at Withers, intending to pistol whip him, but Withers grabbed his arm. "Lilka of ice." The other two came at Withers again but he kicked an office chair in front of them. Withers quickly went out the door, pushing aside another officer who got in his way. The officer was bewildered that his weapon didn't fire. Outside, Withers jumped in the chariot and studied the controls. The oracle instantly gave him the knowledge to operate it, and he took off down the road. "He set up the city center like a fortress," said Tristan Seymour. "LT should be a place for everyone to share and enjoy." Seymour wore the simple clothing of rebels, with a very plain light blue shirt with tattered ends, and trousers that only went halfway down his lower legs. His shoes were slip-ons which hardly covered his ankles. "Where are you from?" asked Vyler. "Fairyland. It's been like this for many years." Vyler was the rebel commander. When he had first seen Seymour he had almost shot him, but something alerted him to the fact that this was a good man. Seymour had been in Rylos since the day before and had immediately come into contact with the local freedom fighters. At that moment, they were on a raid to rescue an important comrade who had been captured by the local authorities. "Why don't you just kill the mayor?" queried Seymour. "He and a few others are probably the only ones who are really corrupted." He's too well guarded, replied Vyler. We've lost a lot of good men to that fat Führer. Using the Oracle like a global positioning system, Withers had the notion that the Shadow Lord was in the city center. When he parked the chariot a couple of blocks away, several armed men surrounded him. They pointed their weapons at him and motioned for him to get out of the vehicle. One of them spoke on a chunky handheld device. After a short while a few soldiers and Seymour came around the corner. Seymour ran to Withers and grabbed his hand. He's all right. He's a friend of mine, said Seymour. Vyler looked at Withers suspiciously. Where did you come from? I know. You're on a special mission from Cylonia. Well, you can do with all the help you can get, said Withers. He grabbed something from the chariot. All the soldiers' guns were raised again, pointing at Withers. Very alert. That's impressive. He put a black cloak and helmet on, over the top of his own clothes. What are you doing? Asked Vyler, surprised. You'll be killed. Then I'll die fighting for the freedom of Udicia, won't I? Said Withers, patting Vyler's arm. He grinned. Get ready to back me up. Withers drove the chariot straight to the fortress of the town mayor. At the gate, Heb left the guard using the Oracle as a false ID. Withers made his way up the stairs to the entrance of the building. 2 guards were posted at the door. One of them gave him a funny look as if he noticed something was odd, but wasn't sure what it was. Withers marched along a corridor, past a number of offices, keeping his attention on any heat that came from the Oracle. Hey, soldier, what happened to your pants? A senior-looking officer was staring down at Withers' clothing. His tan-colored pants were out of place beneath the black cloak. Sorry, sir, I had to chase some rebels through the mud, replied Withers apologetically. By the way, I've got this message. He grabbed the Oracle and held it towards the man. Suddenly, a surge of vibrations shot out of the Oracle, stunning the officer. He quickly put the unconscious body in a corner and moved on. He rounded a corner to find another 2 sentries, guarding a main entrance to what appeared to be an important room. He walked straight towards them, but before they could grab their weapons, Withers quickly dispatched them with a surge from the Oracle. Barging into the room, he immediately saw the fat Shadow Lord lounging on a couch being hand-fed fruit by 2 scantily clad young women. Fat wasn't the word for this greedy Dark Lord. He was repulsively overweight. He must be the size of a baby elephant, Withers thought. Well, if it isn't the savior of Udicia, said the fat Führer. 2 more guards raced through the door and positioned themselves between the Führer and Withers. Withers looked around the room, appalled at the amount of wealth in this large room. It looked like the tomb of an ancient pharaoh of Egypt. Savior, said Withers, disgusted. He picked up a large gold dinner plate and studied the design on it. There's enough wealth here to give everyone in this land a very comfortable life. The fat Führer laughed. Withers was not impressed and threw the gold plate out through the front window like a frisbee. Glass exploded outward from the front window, and the golden discus flew out into the street. That was the signal for Vyler's men to start their attack on the compound. There was sudden gunfire outside and then a loud explosion. Get him, snapped the fat Führer. The 2 young women screamed and ran from the room, as several guards appeared and prepared to engage Withers. Seeing that he was largely outnumbered, Withers held the Oracle in front of him with one hand and waited for its response. At that moment, a huge sonic force expelled from the Oracle and directed its destructive energy towards the guards, just as they were about to open fire. The invisible energy was like a silent explosion, and the guards were picked up and thrown through the air, crashing into the booty that was spread all over the room. The fat Führer was furious. He immediately engaged a levitation device from his belt and began to float in the air. His body began to transform. The fat Führer went from a very overweight human male, that was unbelievably floating in the air, to a grotesque, giant black slug with piercing red eyes. Its huge mouth opened wide, like a great shark about to attack. My God, muttered Withers, raising the Oracle. He intended to throw it into that very mouth, but a long black tongue shot out and knocked the oracle aside, making a clang amongst the hoard of treasures. Withers summoned its return, but as there was so much clutter, the oracle only made it halfway back before becoming stuck. The giant slug laughed an inhuman laugh. The long tongue shot out of the slug's mouth again, wrapping itself around Withers' right leg. He tripped backward and began to be dragged towards that gaping mouth. Withers tried grabbing hold of some of the treasures, but nothing in his reach was heavy enough or anchored strongly enough for him to pull against this tug-of-war towed death. Just as he thought his was going to end up inside the monster, an invisible beam severed the tongue. Withers turned to see Seymour and a group of soldiers, including Vyler. Withers dived out of the way as a barrage of energy bolts pummeled the slug. The beams had little effect, other than making the Shadow Lord very angry. Hundreds of little spikes began to appear all over its skin. Seymour immediately raised his hand and fired an even bigger burst of invisible energy at the Shadow Lord. Just as the slug was puffing up to fire all his deadly spikes, the energy from Seymour's ring entered its gaping mouth. Instead of exploding, the slug imploded. A huge pile of black goo landed on the floor like a giant bowl of black jelly being spilt. Withers looked at Seymour. "I'm impressed." "So am," said Vyler. "I've never seen such a compact sonic weapon before." Hestered at the ring on the middle finger of Seymour's right hand. He noticed it had a symbolic flower on it, with 10 petals. "Well, you're not short of wealth now," said Withers, quickly changing the subject. "At least you now have plenty of money to rebuild your country." "The fat Führer took everything," said the freed soldier in shocked surprise. "I never realized he had amassed so much wealth." "We got our good man back," said Vyler, hugging a man who had just been freed. He turned and also hugged Seymour. "This is Zeph, my top lieutenant. Let's celebrate with a feast tonight." "Oh," said Zeph, "how do you know him?" "He gets around." "This is a lovely banquet," said Seymour, chewing on a drumstick that he assumed belonged to some sort of fowl. "What type of bird is this?" "Nema," said Zeph. "But you would know that coming from Cylonia," commented Vyler. "Okay," said Withers, picking up on Vyler's suspicions. "I'll let you know more about us, but I need your help first." "You need to finish off more bad guys," said Zeph's young son, Nell. "You're sharp, son," said Withers, "and you're right. If all goes well, when you grow up there won't be such a thing as bad guys. You'll be able to use that same witness state your father used to destroy the shadows, to lead your world into a new, loving and compassionate society." "Mister, what are shadows?" asked Nell. "Vampires, I thought," suggested Vyler. "They are the people who are not touched by the light, the source of truth," said Withers, "and the further they're away from that light, the darker they become." "For a moment, I could have sworn I saw a monster floating there and not a fat man," said Vyler, "or was I imagining it?" "Well, the goddess would have made sure the unenlightened never saw a shadowstru form," thought Seymour. "Nah, you must have been imagining it." Chapter 5, The Realm of Security. "We live a very simple life here," said Finn grimly. "That's the way it has to be for us to survive in Bergia. Otherwise, we may be taken away by the secret police," said his wife, Caddis, in almost a whisper. "LT's happening now more than ever. I went to the market the other day, and so many townsfolk are missing, it's terrible." She almost started crying. Finn reassured his wife, Now, dear. It will be okay. Look, the goddess has sent us a guru from Cylonia to help us." Braun looked at a picture of a woman on the mantelpiece. She was dressed in traditional clothing, but it must have been from some other realm in Udicia. Finn was wearing what looked like a variation on a Japanese kimono, with similar beautiful fabric. Instead of sandals, he wore slippers, and the belt around his waist was quite wide and stood out in contrast to the gown. "You have nothing to fear, then. You're still under her protection." "How many gurus are there in this province?" "Few," said Finn. "Collectivity is getting harder and harder, but stronger, in a way. You must all get together somewhere immediately," said Braun, regardless of the risk. "It is almost time for Udicia's judgment." "This way," Finn advised. "We'll go via the forest. Police patrol most of the main streets." Braun, Finn and Caddis headed to the forest on the edge of the suburb. As they approached the forest, Braun noticed how eerily quiet it was. "There's something missing in this forest," said Braun, sensing an impending darkness. "Where are the birds and crickets?" "Well, we can't go through the streets," said Finn. "Let's keep moving," suggested Braun, touching the two gurus on the back at their heart centers. "Any fear that runs through these woods will be offset by our courage." They were not long in the forest and they heard an object shoot into the forest canopy and land with a tremendous crash. It sounded like a meteor. "What was that?" cried Caddis, alarmed. A dark figure approached them at great speed, crashing its way through the forest. Braun saw red eyes, horns on a crude head, and bat wings. It was a shadow angel. Suddenly, a mandala appeared about the group and they were transported to another location. Withers had swapped his position with Braun's and held up the oracle. He collided with the angel and was thrown back several meters through the forest, landing at the edge of a large clearing. Shaken, Withers stood up, summoning his oracle, which had fallen from his grasp. It came flying back through the forest, and he caught it skillfully. There was a lot of dark power coming from this creature. The oracle indicated that it was one of the Shadow Master's elite centurions. This shadow angel made up one of the three opposing powers of the Guardians of the Ways, the opposing power of the left, central and right ways. At that moment, the shadow angel descended from the sky. Its form was eerily superimposed over two of the three moons of Udicia. It crashed into the grassy field issuing a terrible roar. Withers charged at it, the oracle transforming into a sword. He struck the angel with his sword. The angel suddenly countered the blow with a long tail that had a barbed end. "You die tonight, Guardian," it said in a deep, evil voice. The darkness in its voice sent a shiver down Withers' spine. But his heart was flooded with strength, nonetheless. "Catch me if you can." With that, Withers literally ran. He ran in a clockwise direction around the shadow angel, the long grass rooster tailing behind him. The angel tried to flick him with his tail several times but missed. "Keep still," roared the angel, frustrated. He began to shoot flames from his mouth and the grass around them was set instantly ablaze. After a while the fire started to turn into a fiery tornado. The shadow angel flew from the vortex, singeing its tail on the way out. Withers walked through the wall of flame and stood inside the fire. He checked his skin and clothing, but he was unaffected by the searing heat. The angel descended again and landed outside the fire tornado. It opened its jaws and began to blow a gale-force wind, in an attempt to destroy Withers in the fire. The shadow angel's breath began to slow the tornado's spin, moving it in the other direction. Withers reached out with the oracle, which was instantly set alight. He directed it at Angel, and the oracle started raining fireballs on top of it. It roared, flying into the air. It flew above the vortex, as Withers redirected his fire. The shadow angel suddenly came down, being singed on the way down and landing right next to Withers with a crash. It started wrapping its tail around Withers and lifted him up into the air. "Well, isn't this cozy?" said Withers. The shadow angel laughed a sinister laugh and began crushing him. Withers ignored the pain and took control of the fire. Using his attention, he began to narrow the vortex. "I feel your life draining away, Guardian." Withers, close to losing consciousness, watched as the angel's wings caught fire. The shadow angel roared in pain and dropped Withers to the ground. Using his will, Withers allowed the fire to cover them. The fire burned the angel, while Withers was protected. The shadow angel shot into the air, as the firestorm was suddenly extinguished. Braun, Caddis and Finn had been deposited right in front of their planned destination. My goddess, those secret police are falling out of the sky, said Finn, a little shaken. They must have jumped from one of those special chariots, but I've never seen them go up that high, said Caddis. And the way he raced through the forest towards us. How did we get here, anyway? Asked Finn, bewildered. Started Braun. People from the house were standing in the doorway watching them. I think we're being welcomed. Braun noticed the houses in Persia were designed similar to houses in Japan. Even the gardens had a Zen look. Hello. Please come in, said a man from the doorway. This is Kristoff, said Finn to the man. Kristoff, this is Larn. This is my wife, Rosari, said Larn, and my 2 daughters, Penny and Sari. Hello, said Braun, walking into a wide-open living area. A large group of people who looked like they were having a get-together turned to smile at him. Penny, who would have been in her early teens, noted Braun's clothing. Silonia, she queried. Your skin is too white for that country. Braun grinned. He couldn't lie, because these people could read the vibrations through their central nervous systems. He knew that, because many gurus on Earth could in their transformation time. Well, I must be an alien, replied Braun. This must be true, said Penny. Well, Penny, it's good to see the future of Udicia, replied Braun, looking at all the enlightened people around him again, in amongst so much darkness. What's that ring on your right finger? She asked, grabbing his hand. You don't miss much, do you? It's the 12-petaled center of the heart, she said. The great goddess sometimes wore rings like this on her fingers and toes in our ceremonies, but normally gurus don't. She touched the ring and enjoyed the cool breeze around her. There are tremendous vibrations coming from it. Well, it's something that she must have touched, said Braun, speaking as if it wasn't anything special. Well, Penny, said Larn, I think you've interrogated your uncle enough. No, she's fine, said Braun, beginning to realize who Penny might be, but I will go and meet the others. Perhaps we can talk a little later, Penny. Ice, said Penny. Ice was the teenage equivalent of cool or awesome on Persia. Braun spent some time walking around meeting other people. Soon, everyone had gathered in front of an altar and started singing beautiful songs. The altar was adorned with colorful fabrics, burning candles and fragrant flowers. The goddess's photograph was prominently placed in the center of the altar. Later, everyone sat around a large table eating a delicious banquet. Braun noticed movement outside and jumped a little when he saw Withers cross-legged on the lawn out the front. He excused himself. Captain, good to see you, said Braun, shaking Withers' hand. Thanks for getting us out of the way of that monster. That's my job, said Withers, and I've noticed you're doing your job very well. Thanks, said Braun, but you know we're just the instruments of the goddess. I'm learning that fact more and more, replied Withers. What are you learning, Uncle? Said a young female voice. Penny. Braun exclaimed. Hello, young lady, said Withers, noticing the vibrations from the oracle on her arrival. Sit down. Braun gave Withers a funny look when he laid the oracle in Penny's hand. Wow, she said. I can see everything with this. After a while, Withers took the oracle back. How old are you? 13, she said, looking at the oracle wistfully. Your time will come soon, said Withers, but at the moment, you must use your powers to keep everyone safe and together. Withers reached into one of his pockets and handed a small pendant to Penny. It looks like yours, she said excitedly. If something happens to me or my oracle, this will help you find it, said Withers. Penny stared long and hard at the pendant. I understand, Uncle. Chapter 6, The Realm of Collectivity. Withers entered the realm of collectivity in amongst a large crowd of people. A man was giving a speech in the fashion of an American presidential oration. Hot vibrations emitted from the oracle when he looked at the president. He was a shadow lord. Centurions, the vice president and the secretary, stood behind him. Unlike the Sudentai custom of Earth, Udicians wore high collars with neckbands in their chosen colors. Varlia is a proud unified nation, seen as world leaders because of our ideals, which have become the ideals of many other nations. With our current financial downturn, we have taken a more hands-on approach to world issues. If there's trouble abroad, we are there to pull them out. Withers realized that this Shadow Lord was speaking in a way that could have fooled him if he didn't have the oracle. You know about the Cylonian threat. Recently, the Cylonians have made coordinated attacks on every nation in Udicia. They've killed many world leaders in attempts to destabilize the global economy. The crowd was shocked. The president remained silent while they absorbed the news. Should we stand by and watch while these aggressors take away our way of life? He was silent again. Withers saw that the crowd was being swayed by this misconception. No, we will not. We won't. I, Nepzelv, the leader of this great nation, cannot stand by and do nothing. Neither can the Tyronian Empire, for that matter. That's why this government and our allies, on this day, have decided. Suddenly, for a split second, a large mandala appeared behind the president. Then vanished. What do you mean, you didn't see anyone take the president? Snapped Meln over a chunky handheld radio. You were right behind him. I don't believe this. Meln, aged 39 Udician years, which were a little shorter than Earth's, was originally from Cylonia, before he was assigned to Varlia. He wore a dark cloak, bell-shaped cuffs and long boots over his trousers. A holstered energy bolt pistol protruded from his right hip. I'm telling you, he just vanished, sir, said Redm. Redm, 33, wore a tan shirt with a brown vest and long dark brown boots halfway to his knees and carried an energy bolt pistol inside his vest. Sir, crackled a voice over the comlink. We've spotted the president in bushland near the Delph precinct. The voice belonged to Cal, 29 years of age. He wore a white shirt with a few frills, black trousers with long boots to his knees and carried a large energy bolt rifle over his shoulder. How's that possible? Meln asked. You're 3 kilometers away. He only went missing a couple of minutes ago. Well, he's here standing on a chariot alongside the suspect. You won't get away with this, raged the president. I see you rot in prison, along with all the other terrorists we've brought to justice. Withers could see this Shadow Lord was blinded to his own being. He was just a puppet of the Shadow Master. Sit down, ordered Withers, watching the approaching chariots. They'll kill you on sight, said the president. Who the hell do you think you are? Withers ignored him. A sniper attempted to fire at Withers, but Withers neutrally set the weapon with his attention. Other officers also tried, but with the same result. Frustrated, the president roared, "Kill him." At that moment a large mandala appeared. So Withers slipped the chariot, along with the stunned president, through the mandala. Meln stared at the place where Withers and the president had disappeared. So it was true, the president did vanish before Agent Redm's eyes. I told you, sir, said Redm, as if he'd read his mind. Quick! Follow them through, ordered Meln. This portal, or whatever it is, may still be active, Redm signaled for the other agents to follow the commander's chariot. They all went through, and the countryside transformed before their eyes. Commander, said Cal over the radio, I recognize this place, this is Tyrone. Jerry Bourne was at the speech, too, and for a moment he recognized the man who had taken the Varlian president. It was Captain Withers. Bourne was wearing the Western-style clothing of the Varlians, with long leather boots over his trousers, a frilly light green shirt with bell-shaped cuffs, and a vest. He knew the keepers were to make contact with the local gurus and give them strength during these difficult times. He also knew from the knowledge of his 16-petaled ring that he had the powers to displace a Shadow Lord or his Centurion, for that matter. Bourne wasn't one to miss out on an opportunity. He couldn't be. He was the chief engineer from the Centauri, and it had been a very grueling task to keep that baby flying through space. So, when he saw a shrewd vice president taking advantage of the disappearance of his leader, by reassuringly shaking the hands of the people, Bourne made sure he was in the position to receive it. The second the vice president touched Bourne's right hand, the vice president completely vanished. "So what now?" the president asked. "Do you plan to deliver my dead body to the Tyronian dictator, Gylith?" "I thought of that," said Withers, "but we decided to let you go." "Let me go," said the president, baffled. He immediately jumped from the chariot and ran towards the palace gates. "Guards! Guards! Shoot this terrorist!" Withers shook his head. The president's voice was the only real threat to this transformation. He was a coward. Withers opened a mandala and stepped through. It was time he spoke to the Cylonians. Chapter 7, The Realm of Forgiveness. Nestled in a picturesque valley, the Cylonian city of Linsir was like no other place in Udicia. With an abundance of greenery, rolling hills and a vast diversity of wildlife, it was evident that no shadow cast his rule here. Even the people of these lands seemed to be in tune with the beautiful nature around. It was as if the transformation had already well and truly begun. There was only one other realm that shared this. That was Delcia, in the center of the realm of innocence. Yuri Gylith thought he was the luckiest realm keeper in this transformation. He had been there for almost a day and had not met one shadow lord. He was aware of the powers of the ring and the way it exposed any shadow within his realm, but as yet hadn't found any pockets of negativity. Gylith was wearing a long grey robe fastened at the neck, light brown trousers, a white shirt and short stocky boots. Presently, he sat at a table on a boardwalk, sipping a brew that closely resembled coffee. The boardwalk ran along the edge of a river that flowed through the centre of the city. He watched as boat-shaped chariots made their way along the river, the people on board pleasantly chatting and enjoying the scene around them. Suddenly a mandala appeared at the opposite end of his table. Withers looked at him with a grin. "Captain," exclaimed Gylith, dropping his mug on the table. "What a surprise!" "Number 1, said Withers, "in the number 1 realm." "Well," said Gylith, "someone has to sit back and smell the flowers." "Very good," said Withers, "It's good to see there's actually a little piece of earth here." "Oh," said Gylith, "the rest of the place isn't so friendly." "But I still found some good people," replied Withers, sniffing the inviting aroma. "What's that coffee?" "It's similar. The ring tells me it has been ground from a bean," replied Gylith. "There are so many interesting things in this city." "I take it you haven't found any shadow lords here," said Withers. "We do have a way of flushing them out, remember. I've communicated a lot by means of the ring," said Gylith, motioning to his right-hand ring finger, which had a symbolic picture of a third eye. "There's a potential shadow lord here, and he's in the army. He's a general. I wonder how he's been overlooked by the red eyes of the Shadow Master," mused said Withers. "As he's not as yet a shadow, we can't really move him along the way," advised Gylith. "We can only keep him in our attention." "But that won't stop me from paying him a visit," said Withers. "I'll get him to work before Gylith does." Withers entered a Cylonian army compound and was immediately surrounded by a group of soldiers. In the split second of sensing danger, he threw the oracle discus as one of the soldiers was about to fire upon him. The oracle sailed in a wide arc, knocking the crossbows from the hands of all the soldiers. When it returned, Withers held it up ready. A figure of authority approached Withers. "So you must be one of the vigilantes who have been getting around the world causing havoc," said Major Nove. His face was a poker face, but Withers could tell had a few cards up his sleeve. "I'm happy that my status has been upgraded from terrorist," said Withers, also not betraying any emotion. From a long range, a sniper using a high-powered stun rifle tried to fire at Withers. Withers neutralized the weapon at the moment the trigger was being depressed. Suddenly, 3 chariots appeared, hovering above Withers and the Major. The soldiers standing on them lifted their weapons and were about to fire, when Withers put his attention on them, causing them to collide with each other. The soldiers fell back into the chariots, crossbows clattering to the ground. One soldier fell over the side of a chariot. So Withers used the vibrations from the oracle to soften his fall. The major suddenly looked a little uneasy. Soldiers on the ground were holding up their weapons, but weren't sure whether they worked anymore or whether Withers was a friend or foe. "We are wasting time," snapped Withers, feigning anger. "The Tyronians are about to invade." A more senior officer walked out of the command center and looked at the awkward scene. "Okay. You have our attention," said General Nas. "Step into my office." From the oracle, Withers knew that this was the future Shadow Lord. Nas stood behind his desk, glaring at Withers. He'd been in the military for a very long time and seen some unexplained things, but never anyone who could single-handedly hold off a platoon of professional soldiers. "We could sit here all day and talk about me, but that's not important," said Withers. "Let's discuss the Tyronian invasion." "Invasion," said Nas. "We have no intelligence about any such invasion. Why the hell would the Tyronians want to invade Cylonia?" "Well, I'm giving you intelligence, General. Gylith has amassed a large army. He could be here within hours," snapped Withers. "Hours?" mocked Nas. "It would take weeks, possibly months, for Tyrone to stage this ludicrous proposal." "What sort of proof do I need to convince you?" started Withers. "Listen here, Mr. snapped the general. "One if you were the Chancellor of Cylonia would be listening, but who the hell are you?" Withers' eyes lit up. "I will show you how he'll get here in hours." He opened a huge mandala on the floor of the office and looked down at it. Through one of these. Nas's eyes fell on the scene below. "Where's this?" He was shocked by the scene in front of him. "Tyrone. That's the invasion force." "What sort of trick is this?" asked Nas, leaning over the mandala to get a better look. Withers came around behind the general and knocked him in. Withers followed. Withers and the shaken general landed in Tyrone. They watched as thousands and thousands of angry Tyronians massed on chariots around the palace. "Do you want to go over there and see if they're real?" Withers asked. He, too, had been here many years ago as a special forces soldier. "Our intelligence was watching Varlia. We thought Tyrone was too busy border fighting with the Gentinians. The Gentinians were assimilated. They're part of Gylith's empire now. You're their only real threat." "I don't understand," said the general. "Yes, I understand your confusion. There's a bigger picture." Withers pulled the general back into Cylonia. The general stood behind his desk and was quiet for a long time. "All right, I'll send an invasion force to counter theirs. We may have several hundred, but nowhere near the army that dictator has amassed." "Leave that to me," said Withers. "Just get your men ready." A mandala appeared and Withers stepped through. Chapter 8, The Great Juncture. "So, you're in Tyrone. You were supposed to send an army to Cylonia," snapped the Tyronian overlord angrily. His name was Gylith, and he was the master of all the shadows in Udicia. His hair was long and black, his face cruel and sinister, and he wore a long black robe that almost touched the ground. Under the robe he wore the black, tight-fitting uniform of the shadows from the Galactic Empire. He also held a staff that sported a dark glowing orb. The president composed himself, wondering who the hell this man thought he was getting angry at him. "How dare you talk to me like that?" He tried to sound angry. "After all that happened with that Cylonian agent. That is my damn country and my people. I'll sort out my affairs. The only thing we've got to discuss is getting me back home." Enraged, Gylith lifted his staff. A dark energy flowed out. It was turning in an anti-clockwise direction, bringing the president to his knees. "Bow to me. Bow to your master." "What the?" started the president, shocked. He stared at his hands. They were transforming. He was turning black. "You see," sneered Gylith, "it's not all that it seems. I am your master, and you are another one of my pathetic lords that failed to hold their posts. The president stared into a mirror on an adjacent wall and saw his black form and piercing red eyes. "Now I no longer have any use for you," said Gylith, holding up his staff. Suddenly, a dark power radiated from his staff again, and the president's shadow form was being sucked towards it. "No, don't. No!" screamed the president. His black shadowy body was being sucked into the staff like a big vacuum cleaner. After a short moment he was gone. "Now that's better," said Gylith, rubbing his body. "Now I can keep an eye on you." Agents Meln and Redm, who had made it into the courtyard of Gylith's palace, had seen the whole thing. "My God," said Redm. "What the hell are they?" "I don't know," said Meln, looking around for his men who were hiding in the courtyard, "but there's been a change of plan. Everyone, pull out. I repeat, pull out. The president has been—" He paused, looking at Redm, still in disbelief at what they had seen, terminated. Just as they were about to escape the way they had come, a man stood in their path. "This way," urged Withers, and suddenly they were out in the forest a few kilometers away. Meln held his energy bolt weapon up at Withers. "Who are you?" Although the other agents had their weapons trained on him, they were a little edgy as they knew what Withers was capable of. "Daniel Withers," replied Withers, eyeing all the energy weapons, "and you can put those down." Meln motioned for everyone to put their weapons away, although he still held his. "All right, but start talking. I will answer all your questions, when you put that away," snapped Withers. Meln flinched, remembering that Withers had the ability to neutralize their weapons anyway. Reluctantly, he holstered his gun. "You're not from Cylonia, are you?" demanded Meln. "No, I'm from Earth," Withers replied. "Earth? Where the hell is that?" asked Redm. "What is important is where you presently are." "All right," said Meln. "So you're a good alien from Earth, here to seek out and destroy these dark aliens that have—" "They're not aliens," corrected Withers. "These shadows, as we call them, were born into your world, just as you were." "We saw something in there," said Redm. "Oh," said Withers, "that's just a glimpse of the next part of your evolution, a time when the shadows will not be shadows to you. The only reason you saw them, is because you have tuned into my vibrations." "Vibrations?" queried Meln, puzzled. "It's just a higher level of awareness, which normally manifests as heat, if things aren't correct." "Okay," said Meln, "let's say we believe you about our former president, vibrations or not. What now?" "I need your help to defeat the Tyronians," said Withers. "Tyrone is the Great Juncture, the gate, if you like, to a new peaceful life for Udicia. If we win." He paused, giving the Varlian agents a serious look. "If we lose, more darkness will reign over this world, and ultimately the shadows will be able to reconquer planets they have lost, including Earth." "You're a Cylonian spy," said General Veldor accusingly, glaring at Dana Kander. "So don't pretend you're some local peasant." "I'm not a fool." She knew this realm. Tyrone was in a bad state of affairs. It was completely under the control of the shadows, very much like the Middle East 100 years ago on Earth. The few gurus she had found were only here from neighboring countries, trying to make as little impact on the situation as they could. It took a long time for the Tyronian spies to find her. Veldor was impatient. He could have easily killed her. Kander wore a thin tiara around her hair. It was held up in a bun and sat right in the middle of her forehead. There was a symbolic picture on the talisman of a third eye which had started vibrating earlier this morning and was cleverly distinguishing itself, too. Her clothing was typical Tyronian dress for women, high-heeled black boots, tight-fitting dark pants and a cloak. If she kept her cool and played along a bit, perhaps she could stay alive long and not be rescued by the captain. Well, Veldor would have killed anyone in his army who didn't respond immediately. "You're correct," replied Kander. "I'm a spy." Kander had a feeling this man wasn't going to take very long to find the real reason she was here. "Oh, so it talks," snapped Veldor. He could have easily threatened to cut her throat open, but that had already been tried by a few of his soldiers. Kandor sported a large bruise around her right eye, but appeared indifferent to the threats. Veldor paced around Kandor, holding the handle of his sword. "Tell me about this terrorist plot of yours. Your agents have been reported to have killed many of our operatives." "I don't know what you are talking about," said Kandor. "You lie," snapped Veldor. He had pulled his sword and held it at Kandor's neck. Kandor remained calm and took herself to a peaceful place. There was a surge of vibrations from the talisman, and she could feel a cool power around her forehand. Veldor seemed to notice something in Kandor's nature that he was unaccustomed to, fearlessness. "Speak to me," roared Veldor furiously. He raised his sword. At that moment, the Tyronian overlord, Gylith, came into the room. Veldor stiffened in apprehension. Kandor felt a tremendous surge of heat coming from her forehead, signifying that this person radiated much more negativity than all the lords she had encountered so far. Well, murmured Gylith, "you're not a Cylonian spy. Are you?" "She said she was, sire," said the general. "You fool," snapped Gylith. "She's a much more dangerous enemy than that." The overlord raised his staff and directed it towards Kandor. The top of the staff encased a dark, crude-looking orb, which emanated a powerful dark energy. Kandor knew she could be turned into a shadow with this power. Gylith's intention was to kill Kandor immediately, but then he had another thought. Unknown to Gylith, Arden was working behind the scenes to save Kandor. "Throw this keeper into the arena. My pet is very hungry. This will give the army a bit of entertainment before they leave for Cylonia." Kandor stood in the middle of a huge arena, watching the crowd of angry Tyronians from behind a high wire fence. They shouted profanities, threw food and cheered in anticipation of the coming event. She noticed a few meager objects that were left around the arena for a person to climb on or hide behind, but not much else. Looking further afield, she could see some bones scattered here and there. Apparently, this creature ate almost everything. A huge gate started opening on the far side of the arena, and the crowd roared in excitement. Kandor couldn't see anything at first, as it was quite dark beyond the gate. Suddenly, a huge dark, four-legged beast shot out of the gate and headed straight towards her. It was a dog the size of an elephant, but its head looked like a lion's. The crowd's excitement went up a higher octave, as Kandor ducked behind a large boulder. The beast overshot and skidded to a halt. It turned and roared savagely at Kandor, drool dripping from the sides of its muzzle. She felt powerful vibrations coming from the talisman. Her whole forehead was very cool and she directed her attention towards the beast. A surge of invisible power shot out of her face and struck the beast. It was thrown off its feet, becoming airborne, before landing on its back. Kandor walked towards the beast as the crowd went completely wild. Someone fired an energy bolt weapon that hit quite close to her. She ignored it and walked gently towards the beast, listening to its loud breathing. Subtle knowledge through the talisman told her that this beast was not naturally aggressive. In fact, now that she had blasted it with vibrations, it was no more a threat than the family dog. A huge tongue shot out of the giant dog's mouth and licked her arm. "Hey, boy. You want to get out of this place?" The lion dog lifted its whole head in excitement as another white bolt of energy fire hit the ground close by. The lion dog growled in the direction of the blast. The crowd was frantic now. The lion dog got to its feet, and Kandor started climbing up its fur to position herself on its neck. Suddenly, from above Withers sailed down to the ground, landing rather roughly on his feet. "You okay? Can't you see I have everything under control, sir?" asked Kandor. "Well, next time I'll just wait outside," said Withers with a grin. He eyed the lion dog. "Nya pet, you got there." A barrage of energy bolts was being fired at them now, but they were falling short. His attention in overload, Withers jammed all the energy weapons that he could. Some shots were still getting through, and these he deflected with his oracle-formed shield. That way, said Withers, looking towards the gate. He jumped up on the back of Cander's steed, jamming and deflecting any fire still coming their way. The lion dog raced towards the gate, and the pair had to really hold on. It was fast. They flew out of the gate, just as it was beginning to close. By this time, Withers' sword had reformed from the oracle. He was taking care of the soldiers who came too close, while Cander fired some vibrations, which had started coming out of her hands. "Let's get out of here," said Withers, frantically jamming and deflecting more fire. He imagined a huge bubble of energy around them. Now, the firing was being absorbed before the beams came anywhere near them. "That thing amazes me more every time," commented Cander. "You would be surprised how much power you yourself are capable of," replied Withers. A huge blast of dark energy hit them, knocking them off the dog's back. Gylith and 2 of his elite centurions were approaching them. Withers, Cander and the lion dog lay stunned on the ground. Gylith held up his staff and pointed it at Cander. Suddenly, a big wave of dark energy shot out of the end of the staff, spiraling in an anti-clockwise direction. It struck Cander directly on the forehead, and she moaned and fell still. Withers groped for the oracle. "I should have killed you before," snarled Gylith at Cander. He switched his stare to Withers. "Once I've finished off your realm keeper, your mission here will be over, Guardian." He was about to fire another burst, but the oracle shot out of Withers' hand and struck the side of the staff, causing the energy burst to miss. Gylith turned on Withers, enraged, and fired at him. Withers held the oracle up in defense, as it increased in size. The dark energy struck the oracle shield, and Withers struggled to stay on his feet. "Perhaps I'll destroy you first," roared Gylith, directing even more negativity towards Withers. Withers soon realized that Gylith possessed powers beyond any shadow lord or angel that he'd encountered so far. He could feel a terrible darkness bearing down on him. If he didn't get out of it soon, he would be consumed. "This will be easier than I thought," jeered Gylith, watching Withers crumble before him. Suddenly, the lion dog dived in Gylith's direction, forcing him to take his attention away from Withers. He fired at the dog, which landed dead at his feet. In the meantime, Withers had positioned himself in front of Cander, thinking he would sacrifice his life for the keepers. This time, instead of focusing on any form of exchange, his attention went inwards. "You must become those subtle powers within," Arden whispered to him. "That's it," he thought. Tyrone was the realm of the Great Juncture. All he needed to do was manifest the correct powers for it. He held the oracle up in front of his forehead. "Time to die, Guardian," said Gylith, pointing his staff at Withers. Gylith fired at Withers again, and he crumbled to the ground. A darkness went over him, and he could feel his life leaving his body. At that moment, the nearest gate exploded open, and 5 figures in chariots came charging towards Gylith and his centurions. There were fierce exchanges in fire between the agents and the rest of Gylith's soldiers. Meln saw Withers' body just as it disappeared with a flash of a mandala. He directed his chariot in Cander's direction. While Gylith and the others were distracted, Meln pulled the groggy Cander to her feet and started loading her onto the chariot. Meln was about to fire at Gylith and his centurions, but the vision of him killing the president returned. He was a dark man. He would leave him to Withers when he came back. Without warning, Meln lifted his energy bolt weapon and fired a bolt at a watchtower that was positioned close to the perimeter fence. It started to fall slowly and then crashed to the ground, creating a huge plume of dust. When all the dust had settled, the agents, the keeper and the guardian were gone and the Tyronian army were standing there stunned. Gylith turned to one of his closest centurions. "Prepare to invade Cylonia. We need to get somewhere safe," said Meln. "This woman's health is deteriorating." Gylith's dark powers had really taken hold. They had been riding the chariots across open countryside all day. It was lush and green, with many trees and similar wildlife to Earth. Presently, they went up a sharp incline, which gave them all a grand view. "Nice," said Redm. Look. He was pointing to a mountain range with a valley in between. Meln studied the mountains. That must be the Great Juncture. Yes, that's the gate to a new life on Udicia, said Redm. Beyond there is Utopia. Suddenly a mandala enveloped Candor and she vanished. Chapter 9, Beyond the Great Juncture. Withers slowly saw the world coming back into focus. He strained to see the person who was looking down at him expectantly. Then, he finally took in the details of the scene around him. Daniel, said Arden, good to see you're back in the world of the living. Arden asked Withers. He noticed the man was no older than his mother had described him to be, 50 years ago. Yes, replied Arden. What happened? Asked Withers. Gylith almost killed you, said Arden, but we got you out of there in time. We've got Dana here, too. Withers looked at Candor, sleeping in the bed beside him, feeling truly blessed that they had such a divine force watching over them. At this time, at this juncture, you're all too important for us to lose. Withers stared at Arden, realizing the truth. Arden wasn't a Calden agent. He wasn't a Guardian coordinator. It was all just a guise. Arden had been an incarnation all along. Arden opened his hands, palms up. 7 golden stars shot out and penetrated Withers' body where the 7 centers resided. Withers could suddenly see everything. He could see all the galaxies swirling around Arden's body, as if he was one great universe. He could also see what was going on in space, as well as the plans Gylith had on the ground. Withers suddenly vomited, overwhelmed by the capacity of these new powers. For the first time in the history of the Guardians, you will be the first human to be given temporary power and knowledge of an incarnation, said Arden. You are now equipped to challenge the Shadow Master. Withers walked over to the bridge of the Calden cruiser. He stared out at the huge armada of shadow ships, poised for a potential breach in the realms. I'm ready, said Withers, as the shadow ships started firing on the Calden cruisers. He raised the oracle and bowed at Arden in respect. As Withers glanced briefly at the sleeping Candor, a huge mandala appeared around him and he was gone. Gylith's army assembled at the foot of valley between the Thal mountain range, at Great Juncture. This would be the staging point to his invasion of the realms. Completely unaware of what Gylith was about to do, his army prepared for potential weeks of journey to the border of Cylonia. Gylith signaled for his army to come to a halt. He held up his staff and started rotating it in an anti-clockwise direction towards the Great Juncture. Immediately, a wide black vortex started forming, appearing to draw the army towards it. Gylith waved his invasion force forward. They had not moved very far when the vortex slowly stopped spinning. Angry, he motioned the army to halt. The vortex changed color this time. Blackness turned to whiteness, a huge mandala appeared and the rotation started in a clockwise direction. Suddenly, a lone soldier on a chariot came through. Gylith recognized him as General Nas. He raised his staff as a signal to destroy him, but hesitated as the Restov Nas's army started emerging through the white spinning vortex. Gylith and the general met in the middle of the opposing forces. My dear general, I think you're greatly outnumbered. Maybe you'd like to consider a surrender, offered Gylith, motioning to his massive army. Gylith had over 5,000 soldiers, while Nas had only 500. You may have a larger army, replied General Nas fearlessly. But every Solonian soldier is a professional, not some brainwashed zombie. The general was true to his word. 200 of his soldiers were trained marksmen and sported stinger bows, sophisticated crossbows that fired multiple energy bolts. A good marksman could kill up to 6 enemy at a time, with one volley of bolts. Outraged at this remark, Gylith raised his staff. What are you going to do? Snapped Nas. Beat me with that stick. Nas pulled a large energy pistol from his uniform. This weapon was a Cylonian prototype, the first semi-automatic energy weapon made in Udicia. Nas was oblivious to the fact of how deadly his opponent was. A dark, spinning energy shot out of Gylith's staff and hit the general, who was consumed. He cried out as his body was transformed into a shadow. Withers opened a mandala several meters from the ground as he descended from space. With his robe flailing out behind him, he flew through the air like Superman. He landed on the ground in the middle of Gylith's soldiers. The force of the landing caused a huge explosion that threw hundreds of Tyronian soldiers into the air. When the dust cleared, Withers stood in a large crater, his sword held high. 3 other guardians suddenly appeared behind him via separate mandalas, their swords held high ready for Gylith's wrath. In a horseshoe shape behind the Cylonian army, 5 huge mandalas appeared, one after the other, the Lemurians, Alvernians, Rylosians, Bersians and Varlians. Withers eyed the armies of his 6 realms, knowing there were about 2,000 soldiers. He wasn't concerned about the shortfall, the quality of the people was more important. He could see Gylith, Sef, Vyler, Redm, Cal and Meln preparing their battalions for battle. Gylith glared at the scene. Not only had he planned to crush the Cylonian army inter-realm, he also wanted to cause as much collateral damage there as possible. Then he and his army would storm through the remaining pathetic realms, re-establishing his hold on his dominions. His plan was to ally himself with Varlia, too. That would have doubled his force. Instead, the Guardians had played their tricks, and he had lost the potential alliance with Varlia. Now, his army had to face not only Varlia, but all the rebels of Udicia. This, without the pleasure of killing the innocents. He thought of all the rebels being here at the same time. Yes, they're all here. Let's finish them all off once and for all. He motioned for his generals to commence the attack. When the Tyronians led the charge, the Cylonian marksmen didn't waste any time from the vantage points of their sleek-styled chariots. A wide volley of energy bolts immediately rained down on the first wave of the army. Once again, Agent Meln witnessed the transformation of a normal human being into a shadow, General Nas. Nas had assumed his position even more arrogantly than his original human form, ready to turn on the very soldiers he helped to inspire. The Shadow Lord was now barking orders at some of Gylith's officers. Redm, called Meln, over his chunky handheld radio, prepared to take out the bigman with the red eyes and the general's hat. Meln thought he looked a little comical, like someone out of a funny gothic movie, but he knew very well how deadly this shadow was. Gylith was very good at selecting ruthless lords. Red eyes, hat. Oh, got ya, replied Redm. Was that Nas? Yes, said Meln, you lure him out. I'll engage. We'll back you guys up. Crackled Cal over the radio. Thanks, Cal, replied Redm, I'm going in. Gylith was standing on a rise with 3 of his elite centurions. He lifted his staff and started turning it in an anti-clockwise direction. A crude dark portal formed in front of him and began turning like an angry storm. 6 shadow dogs shot out of the center and made their way aggressively towards the Guardians. The Guardians stood their ground as the shadow dogs pounced. Each Guardian swing of his sword was a perfect horseshoe shape, which sliced through each shadow dog. Gylith was so enraged that his form started changing from his usual human appearance into a huge dragon, with large red piercing eyes. 2 huge wings formed, which split into 3 on each side. On the tip of each winglet, crude heads protruded with their own shadow identities. His 3 elite centurions transformed into shadow angels, flew into the air and landed with a crash, roaring at their guardian adversaries. With Cal covering him from potential attacks, Redm attracted the general's attention by firing a volley of shots at and around his chariot. A few of his newly adopted officers made their way over to Redm's position on several chariots. From even further afield, Cal, using a high-powered sniper rifle, took out 2 of Nas's officers before coming under fire himself. Redm took another one out much the same way, as Meln flew in front of Nas on his chariot with an energy pistol. Agent Meln, said Nas, firing his deadly prototype pistol. Meln tilted his chariot wildly to avoid being hit, as Naza's pistol blew a large hole in the side of his chariot. This sent it spinning, as the shot destroyed one of the levitation devices. Meln fell to the ground, the chariot spinning along its edge and collecting a group of Tyronian soldiers. Withers spotted a quick way up to where Gylith was transforming. He flew into the air and landed on the closest enemy chariot, knocking the soldiers to the ground. He quickly started jumping from one chariot to the next, swiping any soldier that got in his way. He disengaged any fire that was directed his way. Naz loomed above Meln on his chariot, pointing his gun. "I remember you," snarled Naz, the double agent. "You got that right," snapped Meln, "you traitor." Meln's job had been to send intelligence back to Cylonia about a potential alliance between the Tyronian and Varlian governments. He eventually got hooked up with the Varlian Secret Service to get close to the president. He didn't know about Shadow Lords then. He wished he had known, he would have popped off the president himself, instead of protecting him. Naz raised his prototype pistol and began squeezing the trigger. "Thanks for all that useful intel. It has been forwarded on to the master." At that moment, Naz's hat flew off, and a large piece from the side of his face went missing. Instead of blood, black goo splattered around his chariot. Cal's shot had reached its mark. Meln watched in fascinated horror as the side of Naz's face reformed itself. Naz laughed an evil laugh. The Rylosian commander, Vyler, came out of the battle and rammed Naz's chariot. Naz fell to the ground, his gun flying. Meln grabbed Naz's gun and fired the fancy weapon as the general got back on his feet. A large hole appeared at the top of his chest, but immediately started closing over again. Naz swiped at the gun in Meln's hand and it sailed away. "I'll crush you with my bare hands." He grabbed Meln by the throat and lifted him up in the air. Suddenly, Meln heard a loud swooshing sound. A shadow angel collided with Naz and both shadows flew off into the distance. A guardian landed with a thud next to him. It was Yarmul, who protected the realm of collectivity. Meln gave Yarmul a bewildered look, too stunned to say anything. When Withers finally made it to the rise, the Gylith dragon roared at him. All 6 of the dragon's winglets speared their way towards him, like angry snakes. Shadowheads roared at him from the ends of winglets, and each head started snapping at different parts of Withers' body. One managed to rip at his pants, but couldn't get its teeth into him. Withers raised his sword and started swinging it in a very precise and deadly fashion. The heads flew through the air and a few rolled down the hill. The winglets retracted headless, but immediately began respawning. The heads at the ends of the winglets represented Gylith's rule over the 6 realms as his 3 shadow angels represented his rule over the 3 ways. Withers realized it would take more than chopping off those 6 heads to bring Gylith down. They came at him again. This time the winglets transformed into tentacles and bound him up. His sword fell to the ground as each head roared at him at face level. He noticed that each one carried the faces of all the lords who were displaced by the keepers in the right way. He put his attention on the oracle, which transformed itself into a cutting disc. It flew in front of his face, slicing off all the heads. The tentacles released him, and Heron between the Gylith dragon's legs. The Gylith dragon tried to snap at him, but Withers managed to get underneath the monster. He directed the oracle at the belly of the beast. There was a tremendous surge of energy, which threw the Gylith dragon into the air. There was an explosion as the shadow monster hit the earth. This killed many Tyronian soldiers who were overwhelming Yulef's, Sef's and Vyler's companies. Withers super-jumped down, aiming his sword at Gylith's black heart. But, as he was about to make his deadly plunge, tentacles bound him and threw him into the air. He landed at the entrance of the valley, the Great Juncture. The fight between the Guardians and Shadow Angels still raged. The Guardians were finding their adversaries particularly hard to destroy, but they had devised a clever workaround. Each time they had the advantage, they began throwing the Angels like mortars into any new waves of Tyronian advancements. Withers crawled out of the crater he'd made with his landing, just as the Gylith dragon came bounding over the other side of the rise towards him. He felt shell-shocked from the fall and at this moment, wasn't interpreting all of the extra vibrational power that had been bestowed upon him. He groped for the oracle, but it wasn't anywhere on him or around him. He put his attention on it and waited for its return, but still nothing came. The Gylith dragon approached like a wolf that had cornered its prey. Looking for this, snarled the Gylith dragon, holding up the oracle with one of his winglets. Withers noticed the head that was holding the oracle was the Shadow Lord from the realm of innocence, and it was burning in pain trying to hold it. But Gylith was controlling him. He had little choice. The Gylith dragon roared in the direction of the Great Juncture, and a large dark portal formed. It started spinning in an anti-clockwise direction, and Withers could immediately feel an overwhelming negativity coming from it. The Gylith dragon threw the oracle into the vortex. It was gone. Withers felt a stab of pain about the loss of the oracle, but he didn't felt a loss of vibrational power. Suddenly, the Gylith dragon roared and the 6 spear-shaped winglets shot at Withers, impaling his body with each one. The Gylith dragon lifted Withers up in the air and howled in victory. Withers' head lolled to one side as the vortex began to slow down. Gylith glared at the vortex as it began rotating clockwise. Gylith was about to throw the dead guardian down when he realized he no longer had any power over his wings. Gylith thought he successfully impaled the guardian with 6 spears, but in fact Withers had drawn them into his body. The spear points pierced the 6 centers where they resided within the human body. On the battlefield the allies were getting the upper hand. The Tyronian army had lost many of its numbers, thanks to the help of the Guardians, and was now being pushed back towards the valley. In fact, many had deserted, and Seth's company were rounding up prisoners. The battle between the Guardians and the Shadow Angels ended the moment Withers sacrificed himself to the power of the Great Juncture. Each Guardian sword was making its mark on those foul black hearts. Withers lowered himself to the ground, standing directly in front of the spinning vortex. The Great Juncture started sucking negativity from the realm. Gylith had made the mistake of throwing the oracle away, giving Withers the upper hand. Instead of channeling the power through the oracle, Withers in fact had become the oracle. He opened his eyes, returning from death. He looked down Athos' chest and noticed that each one of the spears was now receding. The black snake-like spears were being turned from black to white and started making their way across to Gylith, who by now had reverted back to his human self. Using the tentacles like ropes, Withers swung Gylith around towards the vortex holding him over the opening. "I banish you from the 6 realms," said Withers. "No, you can't," snarled the Gylith, desperately trying to detach himself. The tentacles suddenly released their grip on Withers, and Gylith was sucked into the vortex. The intensity of the suction increased after this, and hundreds of Gylith soldiers came flying over the hill, down into the valley and through the Great Juncture. Very few of his army remained. They were those who had only been partially infected by the Shadow Master. Feeling drained, Withers walked over the rise and noticed Seth keeping at bay what was left of the Tyronian regime. He and his contingent were poking energy weapons at them to keep them in line. "Thanks, Seth," said Withers wearily, "but that won't be necessary." He noticed Ulef Sandviler's contingents were doing much the same thing. "Drop your weapons. These people are free to go." Seth hesitated, but soon realized his error. "They've passed judgment." "Yes, they are our friends," said Withers. He turned to the group. "Are there any officers here?" A young sergeant came forward and started walking beside Withers. Withers knew the man had been treated harshly by the Tyronian regime. "What's your name?" "Ben, sir." "Now walk beside me, Ben," said Withers. "The Tyronian Empire is in dire need of no leaders. Do you think you're up to it?" "Yes, sir," said Ben in a military style. "Sir is fine, but there's no need to feel subservient," said Withers. "I'm nothing like that tyrant you were working for previously." Later, Withers stood before the allies in the main chamber of the Tyronian palace. I know this may feel a little weird, convening in what was once the chamber of a ruthless dictator, but at this time, at this juncture, it's very important that we put all those emotions about the Empire behind us. Withers stared at his audience intently. It's the only way for this transformation to work. The only way. If you continue Toddwell in what Udicia once was, it will become that once again. I'm sorry I had to say that, but it's important. It will take several years for the transformation to properly establish itself. In this time it's possible for the Shadowstow compromise the situation again. They were up there in space ready for you to lose this war, ready to increase their empire here and to reclaim worlds that were once theirs. They're relentless. I'm happy to say that because of your ability to detect oppression and embryocecal activity, you were able to defeat them. For Udicia, it saw a new era, and new methods of fighting the shadows must be adopted. Withers made a signal to the other 8 guardians. He and the guardians arranged for all the 43 realm keepers from the Centauri to form the 3 ways. Withers moved along the right way and reunited with Zach, Lena, Tristan, Christoph, Jerry, Yuri and Dana, the 7 he had had main contact with. Thanks, crew. You've done a grand job holding up the realms, announced Withers, but I'm sorry to say your time as the keepers of the realms has ended. He looked at Dana. Feeling better? Much better, thanks to Arden, replied Dana. He gazed at the Udician crowd that surrounded the old crew of the Centauri. Would like to announce the new keepers. After the ceremony, where the old keepers passed the rings over to the new keepers, a white-robed, hooded figure appeared at the main entrance. The figure gracefully walked through the assembly of keepers and stood right at the top of the Great Juncture. The robed figure dropped his hood and raised his arms. I am the Great Juncture. All the Centauri crew immediately bowed to him, as did the Udician gurus. Others hesitated, but when they saw Withers bowing to him, they immediately followed suit. The Great Juncture has now opened. Arden turned around and a new realm materialized. The 7th realm appeared as a colorful lotus. On that lotus a beautifully dressed woman stood, adorned with a jeweled headpiece. Behold the goddess. Then, everyone bowed, including Arden. The hologram disappeared. For a while there was meditative silence. Arden turned, admiring the new Udicia. He greeted all the keepers, thanking the old ones and greeting the new. He paid his respect to the other 8 guardians before making his way to Withers. Withers took one last look at Arden as he approached, taking in all the universe that made up every pore of his powerful being. I know. I can't hold this power, started Withers. Arden smiled. Well, just drop it back a little. He placed his arm on Withers' shoulder. Now that you've passed the training, you're the right man for the position of the 10th guardian. Withers accepted the position gracefully without any ego and bowed. I accept, my lord. Arden looked at Withers with admiration and put his hands in a praying position, hail to the great goddess. He then replaced his hood and walked quickly through the hall and out the door. Withers felt a pang of loss as if hadn't spent enough time with Arden. However, Heck knew this was an absurd, selfish human emotion and quickly dismissed it. He knew Arden was always there for him at every moment. Suddenly a large mandala appeared, and Penny materialized. She appeared disoriented, looking around, confused, before seeing Withers. Whoa, ice. Teenagers. They don't take long to figure things out, thought Withers. Glad you could make it. Uncle, I found your disc, said Penny, holding up the oracle. Withers stared at the oracle, flawless in design. Although it looked much like any other oracle owned by a guardian, he knew this one was previously his. It's been bestowed upon you now, said Withers. Your time has come. Penny looked like she was going burst with joy, but suddenly the importance of his words hit her, and she whispered, already. When it comes to divine plans, things are always immediate, said Withers. Don't be concerned about fighting the shadows at this point, there's a long path of learning before then. You'll still need to focus on your schooling first. The oracle will be just like another subject along the way. Should I meet up with the keepers? Asked Penny. The keepers won't see you as a leader yet, replied Withers. The best thing would be to never talk about it. Never. They'll figure it out themselves when the right time comes, replied Withers. Anyway, the oracle will teach you everything you need to know, when you need talk know it. Penny nodded reluctantly. Okay, Uncle. I can do it. Of course you can, and that's why you've been chosen. I will be there for you when you need me. Withers looked at the 43 keepers and back at Penny. Udicia now stands at the beginning of a new era. Peace has finally come to your lands, but for many other worlds out there, the shadows still reign in terror. Your world has a responsibility to bring that same peace to other worlds. Will they ever be defeated? They've now been pushed back into the furthest reaches of the galaxy. Yes, it's possible that we can eventually defeat them. But, at the end of the day, it's up to us. Human beings must seek the greater good and eventually recognize the goddess.